Hello YouTube, and welcome to Scrap to Cast. Tonight I'm going to be talking about where to find free copper. Copper is one of the most sought after metals, so to speak. It's more of like a poor man's metal. But yeah, you can find this stuff pretty much anywhere on the side of the road if you're really willing to look for it. As a bonus, I'm going to be melting down this copper wire, which is scrap from electronics. And then there was a copper platter there that I broke apart. And I usually put it on top of copper wire. This way here, when you actually melt it, what will happen with stranded copper wire is when you're melting it in a furnace right there, the double forge, the pressure in the airflow is so powerful, it'll actually melt the strands of copper and it'll actually blow out through the cover. So I normally put like heavier material on top of it, which will actually melt first. Stranded wire is actually pretty difficult to melt on its own, so you usually want to have a solid in there as well. And I like to put it on the top because it'll melt first and it'll help speed up the process with getting the rest of the copper melted down. And it'll also it'll weigh down those thin strands so it doesn't blow out through the cover. So anyways, I'm just going to show you a few different things first that, you know, where you can actually get free copper, and I'll take you over there in a minute. So, the first place you can find free copper on the side of the road, I would definitely pick up older television sets. The CRT televisions have an abundance of copper inside them. Usually depending upon the size of the TV, you can range anywhere from 1 pound to about 2 pounds of copper. The bigger the TV, usually the rule of thumb is the more copper that's inside them. Some of the newer, older CRTs, like ones from like 2000, it might have an aluminum degaussing cable inside, but you could usually check that really easily by just taking a razor blade to the electrical wire, electrical tape rather, and just cutting into the copper real quick to see if it's worth actually stripping. I generally save everything. I save my copper, brass, and aluminum, also lead when I can actually find it. You know, just to stack pretty much, you know, when times get tough and, you know, I need extra money in the future. I mean, metals are only going to continue to go up, especially with electric vehicles. Batteries, you know, the wire that's going to be running inside those vehicles, and when they make them standardized, you know, I actually see the copper price probably doubling in price, in my personal opinion. But then again, I don't really know too much about economics, but, you know. But anyways, yeah. Television sets, that's pretty much where you'll get your copper. You usually see a lot of these TVs still on the side of the road, but they are getting scarcer and scarcer because most people are actually upgrading to TVs like this. Those TVs literally have almost no copper in them whatsoever. They pretty much just have a bunch of steel. They might have an aluminum backplate and some really thin wire, a couple of mid-grade circuit boards, and that's pretty much about it. I generally don't strip these down. Unless, you know, somebody gives me a free television, like somebody gave me this one of my coworkers, so I probably will scrap this on a future video, just to show you that they pretty much are not worth scrapping, especially for the time involved. Printers, I don't really scrap those. That was given to me by another coworker. The only thing I'm going to take off of that is that power cord, because I will strip the wire and get the free copper from that. But getting back to these TVs here, the yoke is pretty much the most copper you'll get in there, and then the copper degaussing cable. Here's an example of a yoke. You can see clearly the copper that's inside this and wrapped on the outside. These are fairly easy to strip down. Pretty much just cover it with a rag or a towel and just smash it with a sledgehammer, and then you'll get these copper pieces off here. What I usually do is I actually will try to cut the wire off and then peel it off, because there's a lot of like adhesive on there holding it together. And it's really hazardous to melt this stuff down. I mean, I still do melt it down, but I would recommend doing it in a very ventilated area, or at least outside. You can see I usually have the garage door open and I have it right at the edge, so that's more than enough ventilation for something like this. And plus I have a fan over there that I usually put behind me when I'm recording. So, but that's pretty much what you'll find in one of these old television sets, so I definitely recommend picking them up. Getting rid of them afterwards, pretty much the only thing that's left inside them once I scrap them out is pretty much the glass tube and the plastic cover, and pretty much the mounting screws that holds the tube in, and maybe the speakers, and that's about it. Usually you could bring these to like a transfer station. Sometimes there's fees that are charged. Some places you can dispose of them for free. But I wouldn't recommend just throwing them in a dumpster afterwards. So before actually picking these up, you might want to check with your local, your local ordinances or whatever, and see where you could actually get rid of these legally. So another place you can get free copper is inside electric motors, transformers. This electric motor actually came out of a treadmill. It was in my girlfriend's storage unit, and it was just taking up space, and it was pretty much rusted and stuff on the frame. So she allowed me to get rid of it, and I got rid of everything, and I kept the motor, which I'm going to be scrapping down in the future. Transformers of that size, that's probably about a 5 or 6 pound transformer. You can see it's clearly got 2 different coil packs. It's usually got a thicker wire one, and then it's got really thin wire that's very heavy. I would have to say it's literally a mile worth of thin copper wire. This one here on the newer microwaves, you want to like file into this to see if it's actually aluminum or copper. The older microwaves, if this one's copper, this one's always copper. On the newer microwaves, if this one's aluminum, this one usually is copper. And then on the really new microwaves, the inverters, the ones that are pretty light, if this is aluminum, chances are this might be aluminum too. And I filed into this one here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's definitely aluminum wire on the bigger coil, so I know this one is aluminum as well. So, and actually there's a little cut right there that I did just to confirm that. So this is just going to go in my transformers pile. I'll mix it in with my copper ones that are too hard to scrap out and just bring it right to the scrap yard. This one has a little transformer built in, or electric motor. So I'll get the windings out of that. That's definitely copper, I can tell. And that's pretty much it. Other places you can get free copper is copper wire. Most average homes use Romex, obviously, so that's actually really good copper wire. That's considered #1 once you strip it, or maybe even bright and shiny depending on your scrap yard. Me personally, I cut that. Every power cord gets cut off of appliances. You can also get copper out of air conditioners. I would recommend getting the refrigerant removed professionally from a licensed refrigerant or air conditioning guy. They'll gladly take the free coolant off your hands if you find somebody that's willing to go through the process of doing it. But they could definitely use it, and they could reuse it for future jobs and stuff. But most of this wire, this is insulated copper wire. You get like adapters and stuff from laptops, a whole bunch of different stuff. And I always cut everything off. This still needs to really be processed, but this is the type of stuff that I will actually strip. I actually have a wire stripping machine, which I'll bring you over here and see. This one I picked up off of Amazon. Very quiet, DC motor. I'm actually going to flip it on real quick. Oh, it's not plugged in, so apparently I'm not going to flip it on. But anyways, it is really quiet. I paid probably about $200 for it, and I've actually stripped quite a bit of wire with it. So I got about 10 pounds inside that bucket right there, and that's all going to be melted in the future, so you'll see that on future videos. And eventually the barrel will be full again, and then I melt it down as I go. So just trying to stack that copper. So Christmas tree lights, not really good for stripping down. I just sell those right to the scrap yard. Networking cable, data cable, I send that in. It's very hard to strip that down, and you get a pretty good premium on that. It's not as bad as low-grade wire, but it's definitely worth hanging on to as you get it. I got some cast aluminum. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff that's mixed in there that's not supposed to be in there, but that's some of those aluminum coils from transformers. I'll melt those down eventually. Really hazardous and dirty because of all the lacquer that they put on it and the tape and everything else. So I usually try to strip these down pretty good. But pretty much this is the type of stuff that I scrap. We got extruded aluminum here. Usually find these, heat sinks in computers. There's a bar that I actually made. I just threw it in there just because I'm going to melt it eventually. But this is like the smaller stuff that I will melt down. We already did low-grade wire. Usually you get these from like computers or any junk wire that's inside like a small like kitchen device or any kind of electronic device. They usually have some bits of junk wire in there. This really is something I really don't really scrap out because of all the plug connectors and then all the zip ties and then all the extra coatings that are on it and the different diameters and gauges. I try to typically stick with, you know, a few different sizes, and that's about it. Electrical plugs, I cut them all off and just dropped that piece, but these are brass right here. They're very easy to remove, so they're worth saving, you know, because in 20 minutes you can get a whole pile of brass. I mean, probably weigh about a pound or two, just based on how much, you know, how much time you want to actually spend doing it. We got some electric motors in here. Most of these I'm not going to strip down, but we've got this came from a vacuum cleaner. Most guys don't scrap vacuum cleaners because there's really not a lot of copper yield inside of it. Vacuum cleaner, but these are very easy to strip down. So I do take the time to at least cut off the cord from a vacuum cleaner, which is usually about 25 feet or more in most cases. So that's actually the most valuable part of the vacuum cleaner, in my opinion. And then obviously the small electric motor that's inside. Normally I just cut it here with an angle grinder with a cutting disc right down the middle on both sides, and then I get a screwdriver and just pull it out the other end and put it in the vise and do it that way. So, you know, I mean, pretty much you can find copper almost anywhere. Any electronic device will have some kind of copper in it, but you really want to go after the stuff that, you know, yields a lot more copper. Like this came from a smaller TV. So like that TV right there will probably have a yoke about this size in there. And then the other yoke that I showed you, that came out of a 32-inch TV. So, but anyways, just wanted to show you where I get most of my free scrap off the side of the road. And now we're going to go ahead and melt down some copper. One thing I always do, I always put a piece of cardboard down on top of the fire brick. The reason for that is where the crucible is really hot, and if you don't put it on a piece of cardboard barrier between it, it'll actually stick to the fire brick when you're trying to pull it out. So it's just a lot easier putting a piece of cardboard in and then putting the crucible on top of the cardboard, and I got that extra barrier. And then I'll melt this once the copper starts getting molten. I'll add that to the pot. So done like this. Oh, I don't know. There we go. And that'll be melted in about probably 10 to 15 minutes. And we'll come back when we're going to heat up the tools. Now the copper in the crucible is pretty much completely melted, and I'm just going to add that piece that I preheated. You always want to preheat any material you're going to add to a crucible. Reason being is you want to get rid of all the moisture that's inside. If you don't and you put it into molten copper, then pretty much what's going to happen is there's going to be a steam explosion. So go ahead and add that in gently. Hopefully we can get the cover closed. If not, no big deal. We'll go ahead and start it again. come back when it's pretty much melted. So that piece is pretty much melting down as we speak. I'm going to go ahead and turn up the heat a little bit. And in the process, I'm going to go ahead and, in the meantime rather, I'm going to go ahead and preheat the tools, get rid of any moisture, and then we'll get ready to pour. I'm going to go ahead and preheat the bowl. That's the first step, preheat the bowl. The tools are the last thing you want to preheat. Next step is we're going to remove the slag. And it looks like there's a little bit of slag in this. Actually, there's a lot of slag in this. You're going to see right now. That's all that lacquer that was on the wire. Pretty much just adheres to this stuff. There's a lot of borax in here from the last melt. You see it oozing down the side. Go ahead and get ready to pour this. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. You can hear it boiling. You can see there's still some borax in there and some junk, but this crucible is almost on its way out. It's pretty thin. Probably get about 3 or 4 more melts out of it, and that's it. So we'll go ahead and put it back inside. You should always let it cool down naturally inside the furnace. There's a little bit of copper. I don't know why I'm saying aluminum. There's a little bit of copper left in there, like a little drop. So then shut that. Close this. Propane is already off. Nope, it wasn't. Now it's off. The shut-off valve was shut off, so it doesn't matter. So, this is probably about a 2-pound bar, roughly. There we go. You can see it right there, still glowing. Might be a little bit of brass in there, but we'll soon find out. And the quench. One little hole right there. Not terrible. The back came out pretty nice. I love it when you can see the waves when you actually pour. I don't really know how to describe it, but that's pretty much it. So I'm not going to bother cleaning this one up right now. I'll get to it a little later. And I'll do a final weigh-in and show you what we got. Okay, we got that bar all cleaned up. It actually looks pretty nice on this side. I love the pouring side versus the bottom side. Bottom side, you usually get a couple holes in it. Copper is very hard to pour, especially into a cast iron mold or a steel mold. If you want to eliminate holes, you're better off casting in like a graphite mold. But unfortunately, they're kind of expensive for the size that I need. So this is pretty much good for what I need to do it with it. So, but I just love the feel of it, especially here. But we're gonna go ahead and weigh it up. It's set to grams right now, but I'll switch it over. So that's 818 grams. That's a little shy of 2 pounds. Let's go ahead and let's see, about 29 ounces roughly. So 1 pound, almost 13 ounces. So, and that was pretty much that junk wire that I showed you. That was stripped down inside the crucible at the beginning of the video, and that little copper platter. So another addition to the stack. I anticipate about 60 pounds worth of copper here. My goal in the next 10 years rather, the next 10 years, I'm anticipating having about 1,000 pounds. But I might reach that goal a lot earlier than I expected, but it really takes a long time to strip a lot of stuff that you get for free on the side of the road to equal this amount of copper. This was the first thing I ever poured. I poured it into that little cast iron frying pan that you saw me putting the slag in. So that was the first thing I poured. And then the second thing I poured was this. And that was about 2 years ago. And most of the bars I've added, the ones that have a WS on it, that just tells me that was copper wire that I stripped with the wire stripping machine. I'm melting that separately than all the other copper that I get, only because I want to keep track of it, so I know which bar pretty much was that kind of wire that I stripped with the machine. So it'll be easy to keep track of it and to you know, let me know pretty much when I make my money back on the machine. I spend about 200 bucks on the machine, like I said earlier, so you know, I'm looking to recoup my money pretty quickly on that. But it got excellent reviews, so, and it's very quiet, and I haven't really had any problem with it since. So anyways, thanks for looking.